Our reporter Liu Jiaxin has more.
With the newly reported cases rising, the government has taken all the tried and tested measures, including traffic control, more testing, and the shuttering of non-essential businesses. So this time, while the city is under its second nucleic acid mass testing, the government also said that they understand the people's worries to their day-to-day necessities and the possible rising in prices of the foods. Because as far as I am concerned, in vegetable sections, vegetable prices are up 50% due to its higher logistic costs. Because right now, if the vehicles and cars need to enter the Yangzhou city, they need to hold a negative test result over the past 48 hours. So that slows down the process of the city's logistics, but it's necessary. And this time, the government is trying to hold 9,000 to 10,000 tons of stock that can meet the city's demands for basic agricultural products and its sideline products for a week. Nanjing government paid more attention to the home isolation and quarantine because people under home quarantine are suggested to install a kind of technological devices like electronic door sensor and the dynamic temperature stickers. The door sensor can provide the relevant departments of the people's travel situation, like if the person leave the home during their quarantine, and the temperature stickers provide real-time notifications if the person's body temperature is abnormal. And let's back to the fourth round of nucleic acid test among the city, especially in 9 districts, 58 streets.
You're watching Africa Live. Let's take a short break. Coming up, Germany confronts its role in colonial exploitation as it returns stolen artifacts to Nigeria.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
I've been Shibuya, Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
For some, they're rare artworks, centerpieces of Europe's biggest museums. For others, they're painful reminders of colonialism and exploitation. Now, Germany has become the latest country to return precious antiquities to the original places they were taken from. Trent Murray reports from Berlin.
Well, this is the Humboldt Forum, an $800 million museum which has just opened here in the historic centre of Berlin. But this colossal project has been controversial on several fronts. Firstly, it sits on the site of the former East German Parliament, which was demolished to make way for this new project. And as for the design, well, you could be mistaken for thinking that this is a seat of power for some sort of royal family. And that's because the building largely is a replica of a Prussian palace which sat here for hundreds of years before being lost to Allied bombing in World War II. But it's what was meant to be inside this place that's become the real flashpoint, particularly for Germany's relations with Africa. The museum had planned to display the Benin bronzes, ancient sculptures that once decorated the former Kingdom of Benin, an area which is now southern Nigeria. But that, as you might imagine, has been hugely controversial. That's because the artifacts were stolen by British soldiers in the late 19th century, brought back to Europe and then sold off to various European and North American museums. And while Germany has held on to theirs ever since, activists have long said it's time to give them back. Despite some initial pushback, years of campaigning and calls between Abuja and Berlin has paid off and has finally seen an agreement on restitution of the ancient antiquities. Authorities here say the official restitution process will begin next year, and it is expected that some of the sculptures will be housed in a new museum in Benin City. But there are questions about whether the whole collection will be sent home or just a few items. But it still is a significant step, one for Germany in particular, who's been forced to confront its role in colonialism and exploitation, as well as for other countries, including the UK, as pressure builds on them to return the ancient relics to their rightful home. Trent Murray, CGTN, Berlin.
There's growing recognition of the prevalence of mental illnesses in Africa. However, the range of medical services available remains alarmingly low, and mental disorders are still stigmatized. In some communities, tension exists between the traditional, the spiritual and medical fields in the treatment of mental illnesses. CGTN's Lindy Mtongana traveled to Kisumu, Kenya to explore this issue further for this episode of Panorama Africa. This story contains images that some viewers may find disturbing.
A port city on the shores of Lake Victoria, Kisumu is the largest city in western Kenya. Its social, political and economic significance has made it a key player in Kenya's pre- and post-independent history. It's also home to Father John Pesa, founder of the Holy Ghost Coptic Church of Africa and a self-proclaimed healer of the mentally ill. Father John Pesa's Sunday service is well underway for a congregation of the faithful and his patients. It is a smaller crowd than usual due to pandemic regulations, he tells us. Even so, it is clear the cleric enjoys a loyal and abiding following.
How many people love me?
Father Pesa's reputation precedes him. He's been healing the sick since 1961, he claims, but no stranger to controversy. Father Pesa's methods and practice, including chaining his patients, have earned him fierce criticism.
Imagine you are alone dealing with 5 unstable people. What would you do? And yet some have the wandering disease, where they just move around aimlessly. If you leave that person, they might just wander off. What if a person gets hit by a car? What will you tell the family that put this patient under your care? So we chain them.
Unexpectedly, Pesa conducts a seemingly staged demonstration of how his healing works.
He is going into a trance. His mind is resting. I'm the one who produces his spiritual power. It's the power that is doing this. That is the power of God that heals people at Coptic Church. God is the only one who knows what he does and how it heals. It is a natural factor beyond my human knowledge. Even I don't know.
Natural factor beyond human knowledge.
Whenever I touch someone and they fall into a trance, gradually they begin to change. That change is what shows me the person is healed.
A short drive from Pesa's church brings us to Maseno University, where we meet Professor Otieno Omolo. The retired physician-turned-lecturer was among Kenya's first cohort of child psychiatrists and once led the country's only psychiatric hospital. His disregard for Father Pesa is evident.
That is somebody who is completely ignorant of whatever he's doing. And most of the things you are talking about, I'm aware of them. People being chained and all, those are criminal activities. And it is unfortunate that the judicial arm or the executive arm is not taking action against that.
The judicial arm has tried. Last year, a court ordered Pesa to pay damages of up to $5,000 for violating a young man's freedom of movement and right to education. But the courts can do little when patients are voluntarily placed in the cleric's care by their own relatives. A former patient's unshakable trust in Father Pesa and his methods is evidence of that.
Yes, at one time when I was like somehow becoming violent, then I was also chained. Yes, but that is just to control those who may be violent. You see, some of these illnesses, they may not be treated fully in our hospitals or medically. So that's why prayers are also important. And faith healing is very real and it works.
In many cases, faith healers operate in a grey area, not formally regulated either by the church or government, and this is where abuses can take place. In 2020, a Human Rights Watch report revealed how men, women and children with psychosocial disabilities are chained or locked in confined spaces in 60 countries across Asia, Africa, Europe, the Middle East and the Americas. Professor Omolo suggests the formalization of spiritual counseling would help eliminate abuses. After all, spirituality can contribute to an individual's healing.
Now, as a scientist, as a medic, of course, I don't think prayers would help anybody as such directly. However, I'm very much aware of spirituality. I'm very much aware of the fact that when you are talking of quality of life, which of course is both physical and mental, isn't it? The issue of the spiritual domain is important. People who have strong faith or who believe in something generally tend to have a better outcome than somebody who just has no belief in anything. Because it gives us, most times spirituality gives us some sort of a direction.
The influence of the spiritual domain gives legitimacy to alternative healing practices, especially on a continent where clinical mental health services are scarce. In Africa, the number of psychiatrists per 100,000 people ranges from 0.01 in Burundi, 0.2 here in Kenya, and 2.4 in Mauritius. But this is a far cry from high-income countries with an average of 9 psychiatrists per 100,000 people. The leading causes of mental illness in Africa include poverty, war and conflict, insufficient resources, and living with other diseases such as HIV/AIDS or cancer. The coronavirus pandemic has raised levels of stress and trauma globally, making the situation even more dire. A 2016 UN report identified depression, anxiety, schizophrenia and bipolar disorder as the most common mental illnesses in Africa. But often, lack of awareness renders these disorders invisible until sufferers display severe and dramatic symptoms. To make matters worse, Africa has insufficient outpatient facilities and hospital beds for patients with mental illnesses. This means that the proportion of Africans who go untreated ranges from 75% in South Africa to 90% in Ethiopia and Nigeria. This is known as the treatment gap. In South Africa, the treatment gap is sometimes filled by traditional healers known as sangomas, who diagnose and heal through divination, herbal medicine and rituals. The ability to heal is considered a gift or a calling bestowed by one's ancestors that must then be honed and developed through guided training. Sangomas claim to treat physical, spiritual and mental disorders.
We give them some things to smoke and medicines to drink, but it depends on what's disturbing them. Sometimes it's because they have a spiritual calling, or they're dealing with bad spirits.
Where traditional treatments might not work, Gogo Shabalala refers her patients to medical doctors.
We work together with doctors. We respect each other's gifts. You have gifts and I have mine.
Unethical healers have been known to take advantage of people's beliefs.
Some people use a gift for the wrong things. They go to school to become a traditional healer, but don't actually stay the course. They don't finish. Ultimately, a sangoma is a healer, not a killer.
There is a shift emerging in the policy response to mental health in parts of Africa. In 2020, Kenya became the first country on the continent to appoint a task force and a presidential advisor on mental health. This signaled a growing awareness of the scale of mental health problems.
In 2019, the government recognized the need to really look at mental health in its totality in our country against the background of the fact that depression was going up, domestic violence was going up, suicides were going up, alcohol use disorders were going up. And our task force was asked to establish why. The task force went right through the country, talked to all manner of people in the private sector, in religion, armed forces, the government itself, and reported in July of last year that in fact we have a huge problem with mental health in our country against a very small investment of finance and of human resources.
Dr. Njenga is also the chairperson of a chain of private mental health hospitals in Nairobi. For those who can afford it, the facilities treat psychiatric disorders in a safe and secure environment. The hospital's emphasis on dignity is reflected in the design, clinical approach, and relationship with patients, all in an effort to produce the best outcomes and fight the stigma associated with mental illness.
The reason people stigmatized mental health before is because they were hopeless and helpless, and they felt that there's nothing we could do to help them. Now, as the dark night is coming to an end, people are realizing that actually the earlier you get care, the more likely that you get a good outcome out of it. And that, for me, is what will hit the biggest blow against stigma: knowledge, information, and good outcomes.
Awareness and destigmatization is also being driven by a new generation of mental health advocates, such as broadcast journalist Eugene Mweri.
I went into mental health as a whole because of my own personal story. So early in 2017, I was diagnosed with severe depression and anxiety. Unfortunately, that came after my first suicide attempt. Let me remind you that in Kenya, here we are, suicide is a criminal offense under the Constitution, which means you can get arrested for trying to take your own life. You can end up in a cell. Knowing that, I still went public with my own story. Nobody deserves to be at the point where they feel that you are so alone. I mean, you're deserving of nothing, and there's nothing left to tether you to this world. Nobody deserves to get to that point at all.
Through advocacy and establishing an emergency support network, Mweri is changing the narrative around mental health and connecting those in crisis with professionals. It's work he does not take lightly.
The generations that are coming are more emotionally aware, more in touch with their emotions than the generations before. So the idea of talking things out needs to be encouraged now more than ever.
More needs to be done for mental health in Africa, but there is hope.
As a person who lives with a mental health condition and a psychosocial disability.
Young people across the continent are bringing the conversation on mental wellness to the fore.
Learn about mental health, share with your friends so we can have...
Alongside the work of experts, ethical healers and medical practitioners, mental health policy and practice may well change for the better. Lindim Tongana, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
You're watching Africa Live. Coming up in business news. 1 in 2 Nigerians seeking to leave the country in search of greener pastures. And Tanzania's central bank in measures to boost private sector lending.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The World Bank says 50% of Nigerians want to leave the country to seek better economic opportunities abroad. A recent report says unemployment and other socio-economic challenges have contributed to people trying to leave the country in search of improved lives elsewhere. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam has more.
31-year-old Nwanne Kanweze lives in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. The 2014 graduate of microbiology turned to professional beadmaking after her years of job hunting didn't yield much. Her business, too, has been on a downward spiral. She complains that doing well in an economy like that of Nigeria has become increasingly difficult. So leaving the country is now top on her agenda.
I applied for Nigerian prisons, I applied for Nigerian immigration, I applied for so many federal parastatals, but I couldn't get. So I was like, okay, focus on your bead making. And even like now till now, it's still a struggle, but still no job yet. Lately, I can't even make up to 4,000 naira, but before I used to make up to 10. The cost of materials are very high. Started searching the web, looking for a scholarship that can get free scholarship to the next to study and just leave this country, and I'm just done. I know that I have a good skill, and yeah, the government doesn't appreciate it. Outside there, you can actually access a loan. You know, they can give you a loan to start up your business and make your life a little bit easier.
Nwanne is among millions of Nigerians who are desperate to relocate abroad. A recent report by the World Bank revealed that about 50% of Nigerians want to migrate in search of greener pastures. That's 20% more than the figure recorded in 2014.
I'm tired of this country. And everywhere, every day, you'll just be thinking about how to make it. And when you wake up, you'll be thinking how to put food in your mouth. There's no any other alternative. Go to school, you will not see job.
My passport is ready. Any opportunity, if given a visa, I'll fly out, and that's it for me.
Experts say the number of those who want to leave the country could be higher.
Human beings naturally gravitate to better environments, socio-economic, political environments. And that is because the government of the country or the country itself has not been doing so well. And so people definitely want to go to different greener pastures, so to speak, where they feel their potentials or opportunities will be harnessed, and they have better potentials in terms of getting jobs and even health, education, and medical treatments. So that statistics for me is even low.
For several years, Nigeria has been experiencing brain drain. Key sectors like health and the academia are some of the worst hit. The West African nation spends billions of dollars training professionals only to lose them to other countries. To reverse the trend, experts say Nigeria would have to improve workers' wages, condition of service, infrastructural development, and policies that would enable businesses to flourish. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Over in Tanzania, the central bank is directing $432 million to financial institutions in the country to help them lend more to the private sector. The move is in an effort to mitigate the economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic in the country. CGTN's Isaac Lukando has more.
Tanzania's economy had experienced close to 7% growth for a decade before the COVID-19 pandemic brought the momentum to a halt. The country's central bank now wants to give the economy a boost by getting more businesses to borrow. It says despite improvements in recent times, current borrowing rates are not encouraging.
Loans from commercial banks to the private sector had grown by 15%, and lending rates had gone down from 20 to 17%. But that is still a very high rate.
The central bank plans to guarantee loans to the private sector so that they are issued at a more affordable interest rate. This economist says achieving this will not be easy.
If you have an economy whereby top 4 banks, all of them, they have got the very same structure, lending to employees instead of lending to SMEs and businesses, it takes a lot of time, and it will take a very long time for the private sector to flourish, because there's no private sector that can flourish in an environment such as this one, because you'll be guaranteed that whenever you ask for a loan, your loan will be declined.
Tanzania's economy dropped to 2% growth last year on the back of the COVID-19 pandemic, but performed well compared to the rest of Africa. Avoiding lockdowns and increased revenue from the mining sector helped the country survive the worst effects of the pandemic. According to the World Bank, the COVID-19 pandemic has contributed to the deterioration of business sales and incomes in Tanzania. As a result, the number of Tanzanians living in poverty is estimated to have increased by 600,000 last year. The central bank says its push for affordable loans is specifically targeting the agricultural sector, which employs at least 65% of the population. The bank hopes the move will have far-reaching effects.
Now is not the time that we're going to sell a luxury good like tourism. So the only good that we can sell right now is necessities. Necessities are food. Food, we obtain them from agribusiness, fishing, and farming, like, livestock keeping. So that is the sector the government is trying to focus on, which is a very big plus.
The central bank has forecast a 5.6% growth rate for the economy this year. It hopes favorable lending rates will help achieve this goal, boosting bottom lines for businesses and improving lives. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
The rise in South African producer price inflation does not bode well for the overall domestic inflation outlook. Producers are passing on costs to consumers who are already under financial strain. Angela Kupala tells the story.
Producer inflation unexpectedly jumped to 7.7% year-on-year in June from an already elevated 7.4% in May. One area feeling the pressure is the metals and engineering sector.
One of the key major input costs into the metals and engineering sector from the production point of view, it's actually coming from the mining sector. And then on average, for the last 6 months to June, we've seen prices in the mining sector products actually increasing by, on average, 17%. So that is quite concerning for us because it's putting pressure in terms of profit margins from the industry point of view.
As South Africa comes to terms with the economic costs of the arson and looting, the impact was very clearly on supply chains.
It had a little bit of disruptions, but I think we are glad that there's some normality which is returning and the security has been beefed up. So in the next 3 months or so, I think we'll see a proper return in terms of production patterns.
The short-term prospects for producer inflation are not optimistic, according to analysts.
I think with the oil prices going up and commodity prices going up, and along with internal problems like electricity, supply shortages, and disruptions, it's very likely to increase beyond 8.5–9%. At the moment, we're on the highest level that we've been in 7 years. It's very likely that we'll pass the 8.5% mark, and once we do that, it'll be the highest in 10 years.
This isn't good news for consumers in the short term.
It's going to be very difficult for the Reserve Bank to maintain interest rates this low in this environment. I think there'll be another Monetary Policy Committee meeting where we will get away without a rate cut, but the one in about 4 months' time will be very difficult for them not to give a rate increase, purely because the inflation and the PPI are now both well above the repo rate. And in fact, one of them is above the actual prime rate.
Analysts are concerned about the sustained and elevated food and petroleum-related product price inflation, which they say poses upside pressure on headline producer inflation. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Teenage girls in Kano, Nigeria are learning robotics, among other STEM subjects. They are part of an initiative aimed at opening their minds in a region where education for girls is often not prioritized. CGTN's Joy Kirukijuma reports.
Teenage girls learning robotics, an innovative project by Kabara NGO. It seeks to challenge local views of what girls should be doing in a socially conservative Muslim society. The education of girls in Kano, Nigeria is often cut short. They are expected to marry young.
I came to Kabara to learn robotics, and I have created a lot of things in robotics like paper crinkler, spin in row, spin art machine, and I am happy to share this with my younger ones and the community at large for the growth of our society.
The Kabara initiative is an education success story in northern Nigeria. The brains behind it is engineer Hadiza Garbati.
the whole ideology behind that is to be able to teach them a particular way to think, to reason. It's a logical reasoning. And we found that our girls, even though some of them might not be good at traditional mathematics, they've displayed superior intellect in understanding the way equipments and machines work, and basic concepts of physics and basic concepts in mathematics without necessarily understanding what the subject is. And we think that that is the future.
Over 1,000 children have been abducted from schools in the northwestern states. Kibera has been unaffected by the security crisis plaguing learning institutions. But Garbati had to overcome another challenge: resistance from parents.
The traditional challenges you have of allowing the kids to come out, we've been able to tackle that through the patronage as discussed, and of course providing an environment that supports Islamic rules and regulations as well, allows for growth and allows for opportunity for engagement.
Crucial to the success of Kibera has been support from Nasiru Wada, a close advisor to the Emir of Kano, a local religious figurehead who has strong moral authority in the community.
Tradition tends to not say discourage, but does not put enough emphasis on the education of the girl child, with the belief that, at a certain age, she'll get married, she'll become a housewife. But some fail to see or understand that even a married woman is a manager.
The Kibera initiative was launched in 2016 and has trained over 200 children in the sciences. The children have also attained basic vocational skills such as in goldsmithing and photography. The team hopes to expand across various northern Nigeria states pending the end of security challenges. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
Coming up in sports. Kenyans disappointed by loss in 3,000 meters steeplechase race at the ongoing Tokyo 2020 Olympics.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find